You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives for Part 5 of Ahsoka Shadow Warrior. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and with me, as always, the illustrious Joe Hogan.
Hey boy, how you doing?
I'm fine, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like, listen, I know that no one's going to hear this until after the strike ends. So it's like, what's even the point of saying anything? But like, I'm just wondering when this show is actually going to, like, start to tell a story and get good. Cause like this
Yeah.
episode, it was like, come on, man. These are all you're just showing us things that we've already seen in
Let us
Clone Wars.
snooze.
Like what the heck, man? No, if you're like screaming at your podcast app right now, obviously that is not the way that I feel. This was one of the best hours of Star Wars television to date. On flippin' believable, dude. That's not the word that I want to use, but it
It's a
like,
family show.
dude, I I said it last week when we recorded, I think that, and I don't remember if it was when I recorded or if it was just you and me talking, but like, I think this might be the best Star Wars show. I think I said that last week, and I am now saying this is it. This is the best one. This is the best one because, like, I love Obi-Wan. I love Star Wars Rebels. I love I Mando and Book of Boba Fett. Like, I genuinely have enjoyed everything that's come out. Andor causes me a lot of stress and isn't exactly what I want, but I recognize its quality, and did enjoy watching it, even though it definitely like raised my blood pressure. But this show in particular is the best Star Wars show because it's literally everything great about all of those other shows that I just said. It's in this show. It's all in this one show. All of it is in this one show. So that makes it, that by definition, the best. It's like, hey, what are all of the best things from all of these other things? Yeah, just make sure that there's a healthy dose of every single aspect of that in this one television show. But yeah, this last episode was just like unbelievable. But what did you think of it?
I'm very happy. I think that I no longer have the right to ask Star Wars to do anything ever again because the one thing I was asking for, I got it,
Yeah,
and I got it great,
yeah.
and I'm happy, and yeah, I don't think I am ever allowed to complain about Star Wars ever again. Is how I'm feeling right now. Amazing episode.
Yeah,
I don't know that it's my favorite Star Wars show. That's Clone Wars, and I'm probably very biased for me. But probably my favorite live action show.
yeah. I I will clarify. Rebels is still my favorite because Rebels
Okay.
is animated, and unlike the majority of Star Wars fans, I actually put the animated stuff over everything else. Like Star Wars Rebels is my favorite Star Wars. Full stop. Like, just that's it. Like,
Mhm.
everything else to me now is based on that metric. Like that's the high watermark. That's my barometer for whether or not I'm enjoying this piece of Star Wars content. And I'll forgive a lot of things in animation that I won't forgive in live action. um and Rebels is a really great example of that because there are some episodes of Rebels that I think that most people would be like, "Really, this is your favorite Star Wars?" And it's like, yeah, well, you have to take it as a whole. All, you know, 4 seasons and shorts and the Kanan comic that, and New Dawn, like everything that supports it. Not to mention, an episode of Bad Batch and some Clone Wars content and all of that.
Mm.
Like, but it is, but Rebels, the tone, the art style, the performances, the characters is all like, it is exactly the Star Wars that I want. Like, it is
Mhm.
exactly the Star Wars that I want. Ahsoka, I think, is then like taking that and elevating it a little bit, making it. We talked about this before, right? It's just because it's live action, it's taking it a little bit more seriously. It's a little bit more mature. So I think that I if I'm sort of putting, an objective label on a piece of Star Wars content, which is kind of pointless, but if I'm doing that, then I'm looking at Ahsoka and I'm going like, this is the best show that they've done so far. It's like how I'll say that, like, The Last Jedi is the best movie that's been made since Disney took over. But Solo is my favorite by a long shot. Like, it's not even
Mhm.
close. I'm not going to argue with anybody that Solo is the best made Star Wars movie, but Solo is, my favorite novels are the Brian Daley Han Solo novels, right? Like, I love the adventure and the pulp and like the just like craziness of them. And Solo somehow managed to capture exactly what's in those books, but tell a whole new story. Which we got the news this week that the Lando series is now going to be a Lando movie, and I'm really hoping that they just call it Lando: A Star Wars Story, and that Alden is in it, and that it's just literally Solo too, right? That like we just continue telling stories with those characters in that time period. But I yeah, like I it, like favorite and best don't necessarily mean the same thing,
Yeah, that's
but
fair.
but I look at Ahsoka and I go like, in terms of like, if I'm gonna categorize the things that make Star Wars good, right? Like meaningful relationships between characters, number one. That's always going to be number one. If you think about Star Wars Rebels and Clone Wars, which are two of my favorite pieces of Star Wars, you can understand why I consider that number one and why those are so held in such high regard. Because that's the priority of those shows, right? And then, um, like for me, literally, weirdness is number two. Like you have to, your Star Wars has to be weird. If your Star Wars is not weird, if it's not off the beaten path, if it doesn't make you scratch your head and question what the heck it is you're watching, then it's not Star Wars. It's just not, because like A New Hope starts with these two robots, and and then there's this girl in a hood and this black robot man, and like, what's going on? They're in a desert, and these little glowing eye hood creatures, they took the robots, and it's like, okay, so now we're gonna meet our hero. Like we don't get to what people consider the core of Star Wars, like what people go like, oh, that's Star Wars, for a very long time in that movie. We spend a lot of time in Weirdland before we ever. It's like if you were doing The Wizard of Oz, and instead of the movie starting with Dorothy getting picked up by a tornado and dropped in Oz, you literally, like, you just hung out with the Scarecrow for like 25 minutes. And you're just like, yep, he's there. Yeah, people walking by, and then eventually this girl comes by and helps him out, and then you're like, oh, okay, oh, now the story's starting. Okay, okay, I get it now. I get it. Right, like that's Star Wars, and
Mhm.
then like the style and the like spaceships, lightsabers, duels, all of that stuff is like third for me. Like that, but if you want to make good Star Wars, you have to start with characters, and then you got to get funky, man. You have to fly your spaceship inside the mouth of a space whale in order to make it to another galaxy. Like, it is one of those things that, like, and this is where Andor loses major marks for me every time. This is what I talk about constantly, is that like Andor is just a bunch of people talking on a Star Wars backdrop. And as well made as it is, and as well written as it is, and meaningful the story is, it, at the end of the day, it it puts the plot and politics first. It puts character third and style second. Like and weirdness very rarely enters into it. There is the great moment with my two of my favorite moments from that show are when when he bumps into the guy who's like trying to shake him down for money, and he's got the enforcer guy, and Cassian says, he's like, come on, man, like this isn't you. And it's like he's this gigantic monster man, but it's like he's obviously just a big softy, right? I love that. And then the two weird aliens, those two weird fisherman alien guys that
Yeah,
that help them get off planet or whatever.
with
Like,
that quad jet
yeah,
ship
the
from
quad jumper,
Force
yeah,
Awakens.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, that, like, I love those moments. And then there's one other moment that sticks out to me, which is that like when we first are on Niamos, and which is the beach resort, right? And there's just a shot, and it's like a bunch of people sitting on this weird cement embankment thing, looking at water, I guess. And there's just a weird alien. There's a weird alien there. I'm like, if that's if that's the best you can do, that's not good enough. It's just not good enough for me, in terms of like making it a Star Wars.
Mhm.
I want to, it's got to like give me glowing ice pops, like, because like that's the when we're watching Star Wars, those are the things that like push us past Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica, or
Yeah.
like some of these other things that are also great franchises. I don't really care about Battlestar Galactica, which I people get mad at me for, but Star Trek I love, right? And Star Trek can be super weird too, but in different ways. um but I Star Trek will often like try and like, oh, we're in space where everything's the future or whatever, and then they'll try and ground it with mundane things, right? That like Riker plays the trombone or whatever, and it's like, okay, he doesn't play a weird space instrument, he just plays a trombone. I and Picard or tea Earl Grey hot, right? Like it's like these are very like normal human things, so they kind of go the opposite way. With Star Wars, this was a George thing, right? Of like, everywhere that you have the opportunity to make it just a little bit weird and a little bit alien, do it, right? So like, if you if a cantina scene is outside, like if it feels out of place in your Star Wars, then you're not making a good Star Wars. Like that, to me, that's the thing. And this show, dude, this show takes weird, and like it's a central character in this show. Like they're just like, whether it's like just Balin and Shin are like, they're not weird in that same sense of like space whales or anything like that, but like there's something off about it, right? Like there's something going on there, right? There's something otherworldly, ethereal, mystical about their presence. um I like the Night Sister stuff being brought into it. um the assassin droids are like, the assassin droids have like just this eerie quality to them. Like Dave, this is what I'm getting at, is that Dave just gets it, right? Like Dave gets what the aesthetic is, and what the but more than just the look, because like Andor has the look, right? Everything looks like Star Wars, that's fine. Production design wise, it all looks like Star Wars. But Dave also like gets the vibe, right?
Mm.
Like he understands. He just under like, it's really hard to put it into words, because it's not, this is not a left brain thing, this is a right brain thing, right? Like this is totally a feeling, and vibe is the best word that I have for it, right? Of like, it's just like, it's it's the thing about Star Wars where like everything imperial is over a chasm, and there are no guardrails, and like we don't really question it, right? Like we make jokes about it after the
Yeah.
fact, but when you're watching Star Wars and Kylo Ren steps out on this thing, and Han Solo comes out to meet him, and there's no guardrails, they're just standing in the middle of a giant pit, right? Like they're just on this bridge with this pit, and you're just like, yep, that's super Star Wars. Like it's just so Star Wars. It's stuff like that where it's like it's really hard to explain it, but it is just a vibe. Like it is just it goes beyond aesthetic and style into just like I don't know. It's there's an ineffable quality about it, right? Which I think is what makes it so hard to get it right. That's what makes it so difficult to really nail it down. Um, but this episode in particular, this episode just like lives inside that. I mean, like we start in the world between worlds and we go like this is the cave on like acid. Like it like like the cave on Dagobah is like, hey, take it down a notch. All
Yeah.
right. Like you're going a little hard. Cuz yeah, we see everything we wanted to see. I still can't believe it. I still can't believe that they went the places that they went and showed us what they showed us. And especially like in the specific context that they showed it to us, right? Where I watched this episode with Kara. She watched the first. She's seen the first episode. She hasn't seen any of the rest of the series, um, but she watched this episode with me, and she used it as an excuse to stay up late. Smart, so smart. It was a strategic move, and it made sense. Um, and she was like, "Is this happening?" And like our conversation on the last episode, right? I was like, it is and it isn't. Like it's yes, it's happening and it's real, but it's not happening in reality. And it's like trying to explain it to a 7-year-old, although she understood it a lot better than you did. So
I mean,
um
that's most concepts in general. 7-year-olds are smarter than me, so I'm
yeah.
not really surprised about that.
But yeah, like we as it was going on and like she understood. She said it before I said it. She was like, "So it's this is like a dream," and I was like, it is a dream, but it's a dream that's real. It's a dream that's really happening, but the rules are the same as a dream. So like she's in control of it, but like but it's still there's danger here, right? Like it's still dangerous. There is still something on the line. There are still stakes, but um but is this happening in the real world? No. Like this isn't happening right now. These are things that have already happened, and some of it is how it happened and some of it is the two of them having a conversation in the midst of a memory, right? Like
Mm.
it's just like I can't it's difficult. It's a podcast, so the whole point of it is to put these things into words, but I am having a difficult time putting into words how much I appreciate what Dave did in this episode. And we can really in this instance say Dave because he wrote and directed this one.
Right, yeah.
And this is obviously something that he's been building to since the end of season 2 of Star Wars Rebels. And I think that like everything that we've gotten up until this point have just been hints and sort of stepping stones along the path to get us to literally to this scene. Um or even a series of scenes because it's not just one scene, right? But like this confrontation slash reunion between Anakin and Ahsoka. It just like this is this is what we're all here for, and I think that's why it's resonating with so many people. If you've been watching since Clone Wars and you've had that relationship with Ahsoka where you hated her and then you kind of learn to tolerate her and then you slowly learn to love her and now you can't imagine Star Wars without her, right?
You're actually describing me.
Yeah,
That's
no, I
the
mean
exact journey that I was on.
it's not it's I don't think that it's even remotely unique. I don't think it was by design. I don't think that the intention was for people to have such disdain for her at the beginning. I think that they thought that they were making a kids show, and then they realized, okay, kids are watching, but there are a lot of adults watching this.
Mm.
Um, Star Wars fans in general are watching this, and they pivot in season 3, right? Which is as fast as they could do it because by the time that the movie comes out, they're already into production on season 3, right? So
Sure.
that's why you see it takes them that long to respond. Um but then like from season 3 forward, like the tone of the show shifts quite a bit, and that's when it really becomes, I think, what we all remember Clone Wars as. So every time you go back to start season 1 again, it's like, oh yeah, season 1 was a little bit rough. I mean, like, parts of it are not. Parts of season 1 are some of the best Clone Wars, right? Like, Trespass remains my favorite episode of the series. It is just a really great 22 minutes of television.
I
um
like the first episode because, like, I saw the movie,
yeah.
really disliked it,
Mm,
really disliked the movie, and almost didn't watch the show because of how much I disliked the movie. And then I
yeah.
heard, oh no, the first episode is just Yoda and some clones. I was like, all right, that sounds kind of cool. Let me give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I still love that episode. It's one of my favorite
Yeah.
episodes.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I mean, like, you go from that one into the Malevolence trilogy of episodes, and the Malevolence stuff is great.
Hmm.
The Ryloth stuff in season 1 is great.
Hmm.
There's a lot of really really good stuff in season 1, actually. I but yeah, there's also Blue Shadow Virus. So, like,
It
you know,
never bothered me that much, honestly. I
no,
don't think it's
oh
great, but it's definitely not on my I can't
yeah,
ever watch this episode again list.
that two-parter, I could skip every time. Like, I never need to watch that ever
I
again.
don't hate it. I don't hate it.
Um, I but yeah, it like I do think that journey with that character, um, it's pretty common among those of us who've watched all of it, right?
Mhm.
If you were there, sort of like on the day, from Clone Wars through Rebels through Mando and Book of Boba Fett to this, I think, it's I would you have to be really, like, intellectually dishonest with yourself to not be at the point that we're at, because I do think that her story has been really well crafted over the years.
Mhm.
I think that Ahsoka is potentially the strongest character in Star Wars because of it, because of the amount of screen time that's been dedicated to her character development, because she has existed in the television shows primarily.
Mhm.
Obviously she's been in comic books and novels and stuff like that, but primarily, like it's been this longer form storytelling that she grew up in, right?
And it
um
was also Dave was also kind of there from the beginning with
yeah.
her. So
Well,
it
I
was
mean,
one consistent, story,
yeah,
essentially. It wasn't just like,
yeah,
as much as I love Star Wars creators and having different cooks in the kitchen, it's pretty neat to see her story develop over time. I don't know if this was always the plan to have her develop in this way,
yeah,
but I like her. I like Dave's vision and at least what it's become from the beginning, and I like that. Maybe there wasn't that consistency in the beginning. It was a lot of George was the one kind of steering the ship, but Dave obviously learned from the maker very
yeah.
well, and
I think
has gone on to do this.
what's going to be really interesting is when we get Ezra back, because I think, like, there are three components here, right? Like, Luke is George's character, right?
Mm,
And then Ahsoka belongs to the two of them. It
hmm.
belongs to both George and Dave. They created that character together and told most of her story thus far together. Um, Grogu and Din belong to John Favreau, I think.
Right.
But Ezra is Dave's Luke, right?
Hmm.
And so, when he comes back, and whatever story we have to tell with Ezra, I think will be really interesting to see, because I think that as much as Dave has been thinking about Ahsoka, and as important as Ahsoka is to him, I think that, like, that's the character that he owns the most. um but right, because Ezra is his Luke, Kanan is his Obi-Wan. Like, those were his chance to play with those archetypes and tell that type of story, right? So and Hera is very much his Leia, and like he they built out the Ghost crew the way that they did for a reason, right?
Sure. Yeah.
um but it's going to be very interesting to see what direction that character goes in, and how that character is played with when he returns. But at the moment, it's like Ahsoka is as much a central character to Star Wars as Luke is in reality. Not Luke in like the minds of a lot of the fans. I think we talk about this all the time, right? That like there is an attachment to Luke that it borders on unhealthy for some people, uh in the sense that like it's literally stopping them from enjoying Star Wars, right? Because they have a preconceived notion of who Luke Skywalker was to them. And I think that the EU, right, the Legends canon, did a lot of damage to that character because they turned him into a superhero, just by virtue of, you got to have Luke on the cover of every novel. So um he's going to be everywhere all the time and can't die. Right? Like
Mm.
which is absurd. The way that character was handled in the EU. I'm like it's not to say that there aren't great moments. There absolutely are, and you don't get that without him being persistent throughout all of it. But if you really really want to serve that character, you kill him pretty quick into the EU. Right? Like you do Dark Empire, you can like he is the one who should have died at the beginning of New Jedi Order. That's if you really wanted to serve that character, that would have made the most sense. But instead, he gets just ground into dust by writers over the years. Just like everything interesting about Luke Skywalker is just like eroded by the time you get to the end of the New Jedi Order, because he's been everything to everyone all the time, so he really doesn't have a character.
Mm.
um and then you come back with Last Jedi and everybody gets mad about it because it's like, well, all of a sudden a creator is treating that character's actual journey with respect and giving it giving it an arc and finality, right? As much finality as you can have in Star Wars, because these characters can always come back in one way or another. Case in point, this episode with Anakin, right? Like everybody's like, oh, we know everything there is to know about Anakin, and it's like, no, Anakin persists after his physical death, right? And we'll talk about that in a second. But like um I think if you look at the meaningful stories that were told with Luke and the meaningful stories that have been told with Ahsoka on paper, like it is like they are equal as far as I'm concerned. Like those two characters stand side by side, which makes their standing side by side in Book of Boba Fett that much more interesting to me, because I look at it and I go, okay, these two are she is a little bit of a mentor to him, but like it's weird. The vibe there is not, because like Obi-Wan is like, oh, here's this surrogate father figure for you. I he sort of plays that role to Luke. But and with Ahsoka, it's like, well, she's old enough that you could be like, I guess like she's got kind of an aunt, I guess, but that's not really the vibe. The vibe is more just like an older cousin, right? Like it's they're related, but there's not the authority there, because they're more peers than there is a hierarchy, sort of thing. Especially because Ahsoka has like stalled out on her training,
Mm.
which this episode really confirms for us that, like, I did she ever technically become a knight? No, she doesn't, right? Because she hands her braid to Anakin
Yeah,
when
no,
she
she's
leaves,
always
right?
been a Padawan. Yes.
Yeah, so she's never technically been a Jedi Knight. Um, although um, I would argue in the same way that Anakin faces his trials in Attack of the Clones, and Luke faces his trials in Empire, and then his final trial in Return of the Jedi, right, to become a
Mm.
Jedi Knight. Ahsoka's trials were the end of season 5, right? Like the that whole thing was her trial.
Mhm.
um which is basically what the council says to her, isn't it? Is that like that was their nonsense at the end of
Yeah, like,
that arc, right?
oh, this is a trial for you.
Yeah,
Was it though? Was it the
yeah,
trial?
um yeah, because they basically are like, you're a Jedi Knight now, and then she's like, no, I'm not, I don't accept, I'm leaving the order. Like, she walks away from it, but they were basically like ready to knight her right then and there.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things of like, in the eyes of the order she was ready, but it never technically happened. But in the
Right.
eyes of the Force, it's like, what does a Jedi Knight mean, right? And it's
Mm.
like, is she a Jedi Knight? Absolutely, 100%. um but anyways, like her I I I take this episode as Anakin saying like, okay, now, like, this is it, like, this is actually your final trial, this is it, this is time to complete your training. And um when he says at the end of the episode, there's hope for you yet, like, to me, that is the thing of like, okay, all this nonsense that you've been saying for years of like, I am no Jedi, all of that sort of thing, like, that's like that can fall away now. And obviously the costume changed, she's Ahsoka the White now, all of the Gandalf parallels and everything. It's like, I think I don't think that we're going to get it flat out said, but I think that if you read between the lines, that's what Dave is telling us, is that
Mm.
like, she is officially now a Jedi in the same way that Luke was the second that he tossed his lightsaber
Right.
to the
Yeah.
ground and said, I won't do it. You failed. Right. Um, it's the same thing. And it's the same action, right? She's disarmed. She takes his lightsaber and then she tosses his lightsaber. It's all, the parallels are so good, dude. They're so good. um but yeah, I I don't know, I'm just rambling, but like, it's really difficult there. I just don't know that there's a way to like, to cohesively talk about an episode like this. It has
Yeah.
to, it, a lot like last week when we were talking, and it was like, okay, like, we're like, I'm trying to explain how I feel about the world between worlds and define it for you, but like the literal reality of it is that like, it escapes definition by definition. Right? So
Mhm.
it's like, in the act of trying to define it, you'll just give yourself a headache.
Yeah, going in
um
circles.
and I think this is a similar thing of like, this is not, this is where Dave's so good, because the stuff that he did with Kanan was exactly the same. And I'll bet you anything, I will bet you anything, if you go back and you listen to the episodes of Rebels, like of Rebel Cells, when we were going through that stuff with Kanan being blinded and him trying to figure out how to move forward and all that stuff. And especially like Doom and Jedi Knight, like those episodes. uh this is something that you have to feel your way through. Like, you have to. And Dave is so good at this specific type of storytelling. This is what George saw, that he hired Dave over anybody else, because like, technical qualifications, whatever, there were 100 guys who were qualified at the time to show run a Star Wars animated series, right? And I'll say, like when you look at Bad Batch, you look at uh Resistance, they are competently, capably well run shows. And those are people that were trained by Dave, and came up, alongside him, working on Clone Wars and Rebels. But that that ineffable quality that I'm talking about with Star Wars, it's not as strong in those as it is with the stuff that Dave does, the stuff that Dave works directly on, as Rebels, Clone Wars, Mando, and now Ahsoka, right? Like, they're, because really, like, you can tell the episodes of Mando where Dave was hands on, and the ones where he was just kind of like hanging back.
Mm.
Um, because it does, like, that aspect of it just cranks up a notch. It just cranks up a notch, and I don't know if it's something that you can teach, I do think that it's like it's a sensibility, right? Um it's a lot like how we've been talking about attunement to the force, right? It's like everybody has it, everybody can do it. You can train and learn to sense the force, but some individuals just Luke says this in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic. It's like the door is just open wider for some people than it is for others. Like it's just, and they just start in a place of having that door open wider, and so it looks like it's easier, but it's really just an attunement. It's really just a starting place. So I think that everybody could get there. So maybe you can train it, but you could learn it. But I think that like Dave and George, like I think George recognized in Dave like a natural um inclination towards this stuff. And I will support that further by saying, like, if you haven't watched Avatar the Last Airbender, watch Avatar the Last Airbender, because this stuff that I'm talking about is in that too, right? Like the in the last season, the turtle lion stuff, right? Like it just like that is as Star Wars as anything that's not Star Wars has ever been. Like Aang is talking to an island that is a turtle with a lion's face, that teaches him about the force, because it literally does. Yeah, I mean, like that thing's the Bendu. It is exactly the same thing. um but yeah, yeah, I don't know. That's why it's really difficult. It's really difficult to talk about, to stay on topic, on track in some way, or have some sort of like cohesive conversation about this, because it is just uh we're just kind of stumbling around in fog. you know
Literally,
yeah, very literally.
just like the
um
flashbacks.
I've talked a lot
You have,
about a lot.
you
what
have.
what 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 else? It's
well,
steer me in a direction,
you're
Joe.
you're always very big picture and
Hmm.
very like implications and all that stuff. And I feel like I'm usually I get caught, not caught because like it's I appreciate these things.
Yeah.
I'm watching these episodes and yeah, I'm thinking about that stuff, but like the details that come up, those are the things that I get most excited about. Um so like this episode had so many things, but like the thing that I keep coming back to because I've rewatched it about 3 or 4 times now, um, is just how natural Hayden's acting was with having Ahsoka be his Padawan.
Hmm.
And I feel like I remember a few years back when he was coming back for Kenobi. I feel like I remember reading that he said he watched all of Clone Wars
Yeah.
to kind of prepare of, oh, where else has Anakin been, like to try to get into his head, even though Ahsoka was obviously not involved in that. Um, but like he went out of his way to kind of do his homework, you know what I mean? And the fact that this is the first time we've ever seen Anakin Skywalker live action speaking to Ahsoka, it felt it felt like Matt Lanter's Anakin, but still like it's Hayden. It's Hayden Anakin.
Yep.
But like it felt like such a smooth, seamless blend
Yeah.
of those two totally different portrayals of that character. Um it was perfect. It was perfect. And then the fact that he still has it with a lightsaber, like
Oh
I
god, the twirl,
have
the signature Anakin twirl, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have never been, I think, more impressed with any Star Wars actor's acting and
Hmm.
performance
Hmm.
than Hayden Christensen in this episode.
Yeah.
And I never thought he was a bad actor. Like
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
kind of always been of the impression that all right, George is a wonderful visionary. He's like I obviously love Star Wars. It all came from George, but like his directing on the prequels, I have my feelings on them. They're not always the most complimentary,
Yeah.
but I think Hayden did the best with what he was given. And I'm not
Yeah,
trying to slight anybody or whatever. I do think what he was given in this show was better crafted for a performance than what he was given to deal with
absolutely. Yeah.
in the prequels. And because of that, he crushed it. He was so good this
Oh,
episode. And
dude.
all I want now is more of this. I want to
Yeah.
see more Hayden being Ahsoka's master.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Um, I think so. A couple of things in response to what you said. I think first and foremost, I think that Hayden watched Clone Wars and regretted not being able to play the
Mm,
character
sure.
in those moments, because I think that Matt Lanter was given a lot more to do with the character than
Hmm.
Hayden ever was.
Hmm.
Um, and like to your point, George was not focused on the characters. He was not focused on the actors. That was not why he came back to make the prequels,
Sure.
right? He came back to make the prequels because the digital effects reached a point. Like, he watched Jurassic Park and he looked at ILM and went, "Oh, you guys are ready now." And so they embarked on the special edition stuff, which was really his testing ground
Sure.
for, like, how far can we push this. And then when he felt like he was satisfied, he went, "Okay, let's make this movie." And that's where characters like Jar Jar come in and that sort of thing. um I the other thing that I want to say in response to everything that you just said is, I want to slap every person who says the redemption of Hayden Christensen,
Yeah,
the
it's
redemption of
stupid.
Ahmed Best. Listen, and
Stupid.
everybody, like, listen really closely to what I'm about to say, because people talk about this stuff and I think that people say a lot of things, and I think that most people are right, and correct and coming from the right place on this, in this particular, like, vein of subject that I'm talking about, of the, like this use of the word redemption is reductive and pejorative, right? Like, it's so insulting.
Yeah.
um Both Hayden Christensen and Ahmed Best have more talent for the job that they do than 99% of the people who are criticizing them. They always have from day one.
Yeah.
If you haven't listened to the podcast, which is unfortunately titled the Redemption of Jar Jar Binks, although I think it is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek title, you have to get all the way through it in order to get there. I think that that is missed on the majority of people, that using that term is like, it's actually like, it was never Ahmed Best, Jar Jar Binks, Hayden Christensen, Jake Lloyd, any of these characters or actors that needed to be redeemed. It has always been the fandom that needs to
Mm.
be redeemed, because Hayden has always been a phenomenal performer. Has he always been given the best stuff to work with? No. Has he always been given the best direction? Were the choices in the edit made to serve his performance or to serve technical prowess?
Mm.
And it's very obvious to me that it was about lighting, it was about position, it was about marrying. I mean, like, go listen. There is not a series of films that has been documented from stem to stern as comprehensively as the prequel trilogy. There are hours upon hours of behind the scenes footage. The only thing that comes close is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, right? Like those, and it's very much like they're of the same era. Maybe the Matrix stuff a little is, it kind of starts to get close, but like, those DVDs required a whole second disc in order to contain the hours and hours of behind the scenes stuff, the documentaries, the deleted scenes, the interviews, all of it, commentary tracks. Go through all of it and listen, really listen to the way that those films were made. Those actors were props on set, and they were treated as props on set, and so you end up with performers like Hayden and Natalie Portman, that who are phenomenal actors
Mm.
giving some of their worst performances. I mean, like, Natalie Portman in Revenge of the Sith is one of the worst acting performances I've ever seen in my life, right? Like, it is not good. It is not good. Her dialogue just comes off as complete. She doesn't even want to be there, right? Like you can tell, you can just tell. And she's never really like said it, but you can tell that by the time that they got to that one, she read that script and was like, great, so my character is just pregnant. Like that's her whole thing, and she's just gonna die at the end. Like that's it. That's all she's given to do. She has no agency in the story. She affects nothing, right? She is manipulated by Anakin. She's manipulated by Obi-Wan. That's her whole purpose in the story, in that movie, right? And you can tell that she just didn't care. And then she goes on to like, has she won an Oscar or just been nominated? I don't know, but like Black Swan and all of these other things that she's done, where she's like, obviously she's incredible. Um, Hayden's never been given that respect until recently,
No.
but it was always there. And it I hate it. It pisses me off because it really, like, it hurt his career, and we could have gotten so much more from him as an actor, and as an artist, had he been given more opportunity to show us just how good he is. I mean, if you've seen the movie Shattered Glass, like
Yeah, Shattered Glass is awesome.
he's so good. And so this episode, to come back after all these years, after Clone Wars, after Obi-Wan, after all of that, to give him the opportunity to come back and actually like play this character in these moments. And what you said about like, he captures, not just, he doesn't just recapture his own character, which is difficult after 20 plus years, right? I but he manages to seamlessly merge it with Matt Lanter's performance
Yeah.
and give us exactly what we needed in those moments. And like, it is a difficult series of scenes to do, because this is not it is not Matt Lanter Anakin. It's also not Attack of the Clones Anakin or
Right.
Revenge of the Sith Anakin. It's actually post Return of the Jedi Anakin. This is returned Anakin with all of the experiences of those younger versions, but also all of the experiences of Vader. It's in the dialogue, right? I mean, like, this has been talked about ad nauseum, and by the time that people are listening to this podcast, they'll have heard it so many times from so many sources. I've heard that before is a reference to Luke saying, "I won't fight you," right? Like,
Mhm.
that is so obviously a reference to that. It's also, I mean, I think that that's taking it on surface value. I think it is also in reference to um Obi-Wan in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, basically being like, I don't want to do this, right? Like, I'm like, I and at the end of it being like, I'm not going to do it, I won't kill you, right? And walking away from it. So that's Anakin slash Vader recounting all of that, of like, this is such a Jedi sentiment of like, I won't fight you, but it's like, but I think what he's doing is pressing her and going like, but will you? Because like with Luke, I think it's a little bit of a different thing, because Luke wasn't his student. But I think the test here with Ahsoka is very literally, um I mean, it's called Shadow Warrior. I this is the Jungian psychology thing. She has to eat her shadow. She's been running from it since Malachor.
Mm.
She's been hiding from the galaxy. She's been hiding from the Force in a way. She's been hiding from her destiny, and like hiding from the dark side, hiding from Vader and the responsibility of that, right? And what he needs her to do is to accept that part of what happened, accept her responsibility, and also the fact that she's not responsible, right? There's going to be a lot of contradictions and sort of dueling ideologies in this.
Dueling.
Yeah, but like, that was the lesson, right? Like, that was the lesson, the live or die. And it's like, i think um I think giving up is death, and persevering is living, right? And
Mhm.
in order to persevere, in order for her to move on to the next stage, she needed, this is what was holding her back, was Anakin and Vader, right? And so Hayden had to embody all of that in one episode. seamlessly switch back and forth.
He felt like he has known that character
Hmm.
for what is it, 30 years at that point? Like, yeah, I
Yeah,
met this character 30 years ago.
yeah,
It was so seamless. I was so like I didn't even realize it because I was so excited to be watching the scene. And then by the time we started going to the flashbacks, it kind of sunk in like, oh yeah, wow, he's known her since she was this little kid.
yeah,
And this performance right now feels and it's such a strange thing, right? Because Hayden was Anakin 1 through 3. Clone Wars took place
no,
between.
just 2 and 3, right? He's not
Oh
Anakin
yeah, of
in
course.
yeah, just two
So
and three.
Hayden was Anakin between was 2 and 3. Clone Wars took place between those two, and that Anakin was kind of retroactively changed. Not maybe not changed, but like given more depth and growth,
Yeah,
and I guess added more to his character arc because of his fall to the dark side in 3. But Hayden wasn't there for that. Hayden was there for 2 and 3. So the fact that he had to not only, I mean, you kind of touched on this already, not only go back to the character that he did play many years ago, plus add this extra layer that was retroactively kind of fitted into his character and his performance into 3, and did it so seamless. I was flipping out. I was so impressed with this performance,
yeah,
how natural it felt. I mean, maybe it's silly to be so like excited by this because it was just like what, 2 or 3 scenes. Um, but like the fact that it felt like, oh yeah, this is complete perfect consistency, and just the master has one more lesson. I am not a Last Jedi fan by any
hmm,
stretch of the imagination, but the thing that I love from the Last Jedi is Yoda having one last lesson for his student Luke. That's like
yeah,
I still get teared up from that scene. I
yeah,
love that scene so much. And this felt like the exact same kind of thing while also giving us that uh sense of consistency with
yeah,
Anakin. And I was over the moon watching this episode because of how good it felt. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
So, once is just a thing that happened, right? So, Yoda coming back in Last Jedi to give Luke one last lesson from beyond the Force, right?
Mm.
Twice is maybe a coincidence. So Qui-Gon coming back from the Force
Mm.
just to make sure that Obi-Wan has this one last piece. But 3 times is now a pattern, right? Like
Mm.
this is now a thing that happens in Star Wars.
Mm.
And Anakin coming back to Ahsoka for one more lesson to prepare her for. Now, here's the thing: the lessons that those Jedi come back to teach their former students um, is often a final lesson. It is a lesson
Mm.
on how to finish the job.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know. I don't know if this is Anakin's last lesson for Ahsoka. I actually don't think that it will be. I
Okay.
think that if the series continues into further seasons, I don't think that Ahsoka's going anywhere anytime soon. Um, I think that there's a real possibility that we'll get to see Anakin again. I I would really love to see Anakin in the way that we see Obi-Wan in Return of the Jedi with Luke. The certain point of view conversation of like him
Mm.
coming and sitting on the log next to Luke and that sort of thing. A little bit more casual. This was a combination of the cave and those sorts of lessons being taught. But so it was there's a difference in those other scenes where it's like that is very much that person coming back to talk, that teacher coming back to talk to their student, right? This one was a little bit of that, but it was also a little bit of the Force interceding, I think. And Anakin is very much the envoy of the Force, which is why he embodies both the light and the dark. Here, he is neither and both at the same time. Um, he can have the red lightsaber and he can have the blue lightsaber. It doesn't
Mm.
make a difference, because the Force actually doesn't care, right? The cosmic force is indifferent to the light side and the dark side. What it seeks is balance, right? um because that death brings new life. It always has to be. It's the reason why when you look at the yin and yang, it's not just a circle divided in half and one half is black and one half is white, but that the shape of that symbol is fluid and in motion, right? Just by looking at it, because it's got the sort of the bulb on one side and the tail on the other, and that's mirrored in both parts of that symbol. um it it implies to you that image is in motion, that they revolve around one another. Some days light is on top and some days dark is on top, right? And then
Mm.
furthermore, with the yin and the yang, we have the dots inside of them to represent the fact that, like, there's darkness in light and light in darkness. They're actually the same thing. They're part of the same thing. It's all connected. They're not separate. But so when I look at the cosmic force, and when we get cosmic force stuff, the difference between that and I think like the more of like the Jedi rigidity of it is the indifference to it, right? Like the indifference to the light side and the dark side. So we look at the Mortis trilogy, we look at this, we look at the stuff that Yoda sees in at the end of season 6, um right, in his weird adventure. uh the light and the dark are irrelevant. They're both tools that the Force uses to influence, the galaxy, the universe.
Mm.
So I yeah, like this story very much feels like a cosmic force. It furthermore cements for me that Mortis is in the world between worlds, and that, like, all of this stuff has always been connected. It's just that, like, when Dave got to Rebels, he wanted to create something that was a little bit more visually clear in what it was doing than Mortis. Because Mortis, we have very similar things in Mortis where other times and places are represented, things that have not happened yet but that will come to pass are
Right.
represented in moments on like during the Mortis trilogy, right? Like, especially to like when Anakin takes control of the son and the daughter, and there's the big swirl and then the cloud and it forms Vader's helmet, and we hear a bunch of stuff from Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi, and we hear all sorts of things. um which is very similar. It's similar to that. It's similar to, I think, anytime anybody's gone into a cave, I think when Rey touches the lightsaber, and sees everything that she sees, anytime that a Jedi is having a vision, I think, like, that is the world between worlds. It always has been and it always will be. It's just that Dave defined it. He created a Jedi temple where they studied this aspect of the Force, right? And they put some words around it. That's all that is. But it's always been that. Like I said on the last episode, now I believe that Ilum, when the younglings go into the cave, and man, Jedi Fallen Order supports this as well, because when Cal goes into the cave on Ilum, um yes, he goes into a physical cave and you explore the physical cave, but you don't find your kyber crystal until you go into the world between worlds. Right? It's in the vision that he comes out of the vision with the kyber crystal in his hand, right?
Mm.
So um yeah, yeah, it the great thing about this is what I always talk about: great Star Wars makes other Star Wars better. I don't think that any of these creators, any of these artists, have been consciously, I shouldn't say consciously, I think that they're thinking about it, but they are not, this is not a concerted effort. This is not like, I know that we want to think that the story group is sitting there and master planning this stuff, because we think that that's the right way to do it. And it's like, that's the right way to do a lot of things. But I think, again, this is something that you have to feel your way through. And I think that there's a reason why the stories that I'm referencing are resonant, and then other stuff that happens in Star Wars is not so much, right? Even though they're great stories, all the Dr. Aphra stuff, great stories. There are some really, really great Dr. Aphra stories. Really fun Star Wars, right? Is it resonant? Not really. Not really. Like, her stuff is just kind of, they're fun comics, right? I really like that character. I want to see that character in live action. I think that she deserves her own show. But and to be recognized by like the mainstream Star Wars audience, like that's a character that definitely deserves that. But her stories have not been resonant. They haven't tapped into that stuff yet. um but that these other stories that I'm talking about, these are like, I don't think that the writers of Fallen Order thought about Ilum and him going into a vision and blah blah as like part of like, oh, we're gonna world build this, and then, this is connected into the world between Worlds and Star Wars Rebels. I don't think that they're thinking that way. I think that they felt it out, and they just knew that for the story, how satisfying is it if you go into the cave and you collect a crystal versus you go into the cave, you almost die, and then you come out of a vision, like you go into a vision near death in the water, just like Ahsoka, and then you come out of that reborn. I mean, like, this is all, there's a reason why this stuff is coming out, and it's because like there are mythic archetypes, and there's ancient symbolism and symbology here that that is deeper than Star Wars. So this is Star Wars playing with greater mythology, right?
Mm.
um and so then it ends up rhyming, it ends up reflecting itself. But yeah, like it just, yeah, you know what all of this does for me? Just in this moment, talking about kyber crystals and visions and all of this stuff, I really, 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 really need to see the story where Ray comes out with that yellow kyber crystal.
Oh,
Where
okay.
Where'd that come from? Where'd she get
Mm.
that? Right. I also would like to see a story with Luke. Actually, I think that it exists. I think it's in the comics now. Of him getting the green kyber crystal, and I think he like has a conversation with a High Republic Jedi.
Oh, okay.
Like, he goes into a vision, and this and one of the Jedi from the High Republic series is there, and they talk, and then he discovers his kyber crystal, and it's green, and he's like, oh, it's green.
If you find out where that is, let me know because I would like to check that out myself.
I think it's in the mainline Star Wars comic
Okay.
series.
I dropped off from that a
Yeah,
while
yeah,
ago. It wasn't doing it for me.
yeah. Yeah, but yeah, because I mean, like, before now, the canon uh, uh, story of it is just that it was in Obi-Wan's hut, right, along with other
Right.
things that he
Yeah.
used to construct his lightsaber. But that's like, that stuff predates all of this
Yeah,
Ilum
that was
stuff, right?
Shadows of the
So
Empire. So
yeah,
that was in what
yeah,
96. So
um, yeah. I always, I and you could still do this. You can still absolutely do this, but I always sort of had the idea that Obi-Wan had Qui-Gon's lightsaber, his lightsaber, and Anakin's, right? And and he gives Anakin's lightsaber to Luke. He loses his own on the Death Star, so Vader presumably had it. Although I don't know whatever happened. I don't know if there's a storyline that ever talks about it. I think there was one at one point that like Palpatine had Obi-Wan's lightsaber in like a collection on Coruscant in the Jedi
mm.
Temple, in his palace, right? That was formerly the Jedi Temple. Um, but Qui-Gon's lightsaber was still in the hovel, right? It was in that trunk.
Right. Yeah.
So when Luke goes back, like before Return of the Jedi, um, he would discover like the instructions on how to build a lightsaber, and then he would find a bunch of Obi-Wan's Obi-Wan would have had a bunch of stuff, right? Like just a bunch of
Mm.
like pieces lying around, old pieces of like the same stuff that he used to construct his lightsaber. And then Qui-Gon's is there. So it's like there's all these assembly pieces, but then the only kyber crystal that was there was Qui-Gon's. And
Right.
so like the kyber crystal inside Luke's lightsaber, because it's green, is Qui-Gon's kyber crystal,
Mhm.
but inside like a chassis that's much more like that's constructed of, because Luke's looks a lot more like Obi-Wan's than it does
Right. Yeah.
Anakin's, right? um so yeah, I mean like that I would love to tell that story, to like write that story, and I guess I could just write a fanfic, but I think that there is I think I think that there would be a cool opportunity there of like the same sort of thing of like him going into the world between worlds and then, you know, getting this kyber crystal, but that for it to actually physically literally be the same kyber crystal that Qui-Gon used in his lightsaber, I think would be a cool piece of full circle continuity, because I think that Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi resembles the type of Jedi that Qui-Gon was, much more than the type of Jedi that Obi-Wan or Anakin or Yoda ever were. Um, but yeah, anyways, that's kind of neither here nor there. But where did Rey get her lightsaber from? All of, I mean, like we know that the pieces obviously came from her staff and all that, right? But yeah, where's that kyber crystal from? We need that story. We need that story, man. So many stories that we need with Ray, but that's a whole other thing. And I suppose we're gonna get that eventually, but now we got this stupid strike that is probably delaying things. Um,
We'll be okay.
it's the worst. It's the worst.
We'll be all right.
It's the worst,
We'll
Joe.
be all right.
Um, I just want to note one other thing about this episode. I I I think that Hayden gives one of the best line readings in the entire Star Wars saga with a single word, and that word is incorrect. Uh, he switches from Anakin, because that's sort of the moment where he's like he's gone from the Matt Lanter Anakin back into Revenge of the Sith Anakin.
Mhm.
Where he's like, I don't remember this battle, and she's like, oh, it's the
Yeah.
Siege of Mandalore, all of that stuff. And then he's like, she says all the stuff that she says, and he's like, oh nope, you're missing the point. Back to the beginning, live or die. And she refuses, and he just says incorrect. And the way that he says it is just like, it is the most Vader delivery of that line possible, but coming from Anakin. And he's got the red lightsaber at that point, and it's very much like, this is the Vader that you guys would have had to deal with had Obi-Wan not done what he did, right? Like this is a vision of Vader at his full power, right? um Full strength in the Force, and that's what, it's terrifying. Like, it's legitimately scary. Like we know that Ahsoka is going to be fine because it's her show and the story's not done. There's still lots and lots of road left for this one ahead of it. So it's like, obviously we know that she's going to come out of this, but at the same time we just don't. I think it's playing with, this is Dave just being a genius again, playing with the tension of Anakin switching back and forth
Mhm.
between these persona, and us as the audience just being like, but what does it mean? But what does it mean, right? And so we're trying to parse so much information while Ahsoka is seemingly fighting for her life, right? And we just don't know, like, how does this come to a conclusion, right? um so good. It was just really, really expertly done. This is Star Wars at its absolute best. Like, this is as good as anything in Empire Strikes Back. This is as good as anything in The Last Jedi. It's just like this is high performance, like rocket fuel powered Star Wars. It's so good. Everything, like I don't know how the rest of the season can even happen at this point. It's like, like whatever else we do, I just don't know. Like is like Thrawn's reveal now is gonna be kind of meh, whatever, right? Compared to this, it's a bit of a situation of it maybe peaking early or being, you know, sort of the victim of its own success in a way, because we're gonna go through the rest of the season. It's so funny coming off of the episode where Merrick is revealed to be literally nothing, to then go into an episode because everybody was like, oh, theories, it's gonna be this Star Killer, blah blah blah, and then to turn around and have this be like,
Nothing.
have it be
Nothing.
nothing. Yeah. And then I never thought we were going to get this. I never, ever in a million years thought
I
we were going to get to see Hayden Christensen in live action in the Clone Wars costume, a young Ahsoka. We haven't even talked about Ariana Greenblatt yet, and her incredible performance. Tonally, like just from an auditory perspective, she nailed the performance of Ahsoka, that at times it sounded like Ashley, but
yeah.
not like in the same way that like Matt Lanter and Hayden Christensen both sound like Anakin, and Ewan and James both sound like Obi-Wan, right? Like she got as close to that character as you could without doing an impersonation. It and a lot of it was
And
just like
and
tone.
on top of that, not only was she portraying that character that we already knew from, Clone Wars,
Yeah.
she's supposed to be current day Ahsoka. So she's
Yeah.
like, because she current day Ahsoka's in there.
Yeah.
Like, she knows, it's like, sometimes it was so, like, I was actually gonna ask you a little bit about this because she goes back and forth, right? It's almost like she goes back in time, but she's still current day Ahsoka. No, it's almost like when you're in a dream, when you know you're in a dream, but like you're still kind of going with the way it's taking you. Where like she's back to that first mission where she lost all those clones and she's really upset about it. And at that point, she's current day. At that point, she's past Ahsoka. She's Clone Wars Ahsoka.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the performance, she's Rosario Ahsoka. And I was curious what you felt about that. If that
Yeah.
was because like I'm not really sure how to interpret that. And also like I was a little bit confused by the dialogue of why she was upset that Anakin was joking. Like, yeah, I made a joke. I'm trying to teach you how to survive, how to be a good soldier. Like, all right, what? Ooh, gee, sorry. What does that have to do with
Yeah.
being a good soldier? Why, like, she's upset? I don't know. I didn't understand why she was upset about that. And he's like, yeah, I'm teaching you to be yeah, I'm
Yeah.
joking with you. It's
Yeah.
because I'm teaching you to do these. I was like, are those two things related? It didn't quite connect for me.
Um, yeah, I think okay, so two things are happening here, right? Anakin is taking her back there because she's stuck, right?
Hmm.
She's there's a there um the question that a lot of people have is, where was Ahsoka during the original trilogy? Ahsoka was not emotionally equipped to deal with Vader anymore. She walked away from it. It's a failure, right? She said that much in this show,
Hmm.
right? Like she like literally she says it. She walked away from Anakin, she walked away from Sabine, right? That's the trauma. That's the trauma that needed to be healed. So she part of her, as much as she's put on a facade, and we saw that in Star Wars Rebels, of fulcrum, and she's become this other thing, right? And she's fighting and whatever, and fighting the Inquisitors and whatnot, and she faces Vader. She was not actually ready to face Vader because she wasn't prepared to do the things that needed to be done. I don't mean kill him. Luke is the only one who goes in there with the right mind and the right intention because of, his journey and how he gets there. And he was only ever going to be the right one. So it's like this is all sort of. It's not really her fault, but at the same time, she's responsible. Um, she's stuck in this trauma because she was a child subjected to war,
Hmm.
and this is the first time that we've really seen it laid out in literal terms because it's live action, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Dave was trying to make that point, and having Ariana play this character actually like very young and playing the character in the two ways, right? So her coming across as, Clone Wars Ahsoka. So like that's the other thing is that this is very specific. This is not a generic Clone Wars flashback. That first one is a flashback to the Ryloth trilogy. That is her first command, right? And she does fail. That's the point of that episode.
Right.
And she says those things in that episode to Anakin. That all happens, right? Like even the parts of it where like he's joking and she kind of like calls him out on it and is like it's not word for word, but tonally all of this stuff happened in Clone Wars. Like it actually happened in that episode where
I
she's like
remember
I
that.
failed.
I gotta rewatch
She
that.
You gotta go
I
back
mean, I
and
remember the scene, but like I
and
don't
watch it,
remember.
yeah, because there's a scene where she like starts to break down and Anakin has to like kind of
Right.
pull her back from it and be like, this is the job, like we are in a war and we have to fight in order to stop the war. We can't disengage from it. We've been put into this corner, and if you don't lead these clone troopers, they're going to die anyways. But if your leadership can save them, then you have a responsibility, right? That's the conversation that they end up having.
Mhm.
um and Anakin is right and he's wrong, right? Like that's the thing, is that he's right and he's wrong in all of that. Like the Jedi are wrong to be involved in the war, but is it morally right to stand by while a war rages and you could do something to this is the moral conflict that they're in, of using the clones and being in the Clone War in the first place. If their involvement can bring the war to a swifter end, then for them to stand by and let this conflict drag on with the separatists, they're now responsible for those deaths, right?
Right.
So
With great power.
exactly. So that's what Anakin's trying to get across, and that's the moral conundrum of the Clone Wars and how the Jedi get pulled into it, right? So she's still stuck there. She is still like, and it's so great because that is season 1 of the Clone Wars, right? That was meant to actually be the finale. Was those 3 episodes, the Ryloth stuff, and then they added the
Right.
the
Cad Bane,
Zero
yeah.
episode at the end, which was actually the first episode of season 2. So um, that was sort of meant to be the close of that season and of Ahsoka's story there. But Ahsoka also wasn't meant to live. She was meant to die in season 2 or 3, originally, and that was supposed to be
Really?
like, yeah, so it was supposed to be like a thing of like Anakin losing a Padawan, feeling responsible for it, and then that was sort
Mm.
of like his step towards the dark side,
Oh,
and
cool.
why we
Okay.
never hear about her because of this failure. But then people ended up, getting attached to the character. Dave got attached to the character, and they spun it out into this other thing, right? Which is better for all of us, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
um but the reality of it is that they put a 14-year-old in the middle of a war, told her to lead a bunch of men, and those men died, and that's trauma. She literally has PTSD. It's not shell shock PTSD,
Yeah.
because she's a Jedi and she's stoic and in control of her emotions, for better or worse. I would say for worse. I It's a funny thing with the Jedi, because there's like a thing of like, you can't let your emotions rule you because you have too much power, right? So it's like that leads to the dark side, all of that fear and temptation and all of that stuff. But on the flip side of it, that stoicism practiced to the nth degree we see in Mace Windu, and it's like, well, he's detached and doesn't care, right? So like, which of these is better? Anakin's kind of right when he says like, well, we're supposed to be, um well, what's the word that he uses for it? uh is it, I don't think it's compassion. That's what's coming to mind, but it's like, he's basically like no, like we're supposed to care. So like, that's what I'm doing, is like, well, you're taking it the wrong way. You're bending the rules to suit your own ends. But
Mm.
in any case, um
Yeah, it was jarring to see her in the first flashback,
yeah,
but then I
it's
expected
really
once
unsettling, right?
yeah,
Like,
and once I realized we were fast forwarding to Siege of Mandalore, I
yeah.
was like, okay, she's gonna be much older. Nope, still a kid. I was like, oh, that's impactful. That's pretty crazy. That like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a weird thing, because they're they're limited by what they can do because they want to use Ariana for both of those
Sure.
versions of the character. So I do think that they do a little bit to kind of age her up, and that's definitely when Rosario comes back in a little bit more
Mm.
in the performance. And so, you know, we get this more mature version of Ahsoka in that. But that's sort of my second point, is like that first one is very much a recreation of a moment because Anakin's trying to take her there
Mm.
in order to like show her where her trauma starts, and then she takes him to the siege of Mandalore, right?
Right.
Which is implied by him going like, I don't know this one,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't recognize this battle, I don't recognize this memory. By the way, the reason why I know that first scene is from the Ryloth thing is because of all the Twi'leks that are in it. If you look in the background,
No, yeah,
there are a
I
bunch of
connected
Twi'lek
that it
commanders
was
and stuff. Yeah,
yeah, I connected that it was Ryloth.
that's where my brain started putting it together, and I was like, what was her storyline on Ryloth? Because
Yeah.
I remember the Mace Windu stuff with Cham Syndulla,
Mhm.
and I remember the two clones that find the little girl, right?
Yeah, Numa, yeah.
Numa, who ends up coming back in Star Wars Rebels, and all of that stuff, right? But and then I was like, oh yeah, that's right. There's a whole storyline with Ahsoka.
Mhm.
One of those 3 episodes is Ahsoka getting her first command, and she messes it up.
She was in
She,
a ship though, right? Wasn't it they were
yeah,
leading like
it's a Jedi
yeah,
Star.
it's like a
Yeah,
dogfight or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Okay.
think
I gotta
that they have
rewatch
to
it.
like attack a fuel depot or something like that. I can't remember.
Okay.
It's not exactly what happens in this episode, right? But
Right.
it is
Same idea though. Same
it is
principle.
thematically
Yeah.
pulling from that storyline.
Sure.
Because I think that they have the argument that they have, I think, is aboard the
Yes.
the
Yeah.
ship.
The Star Destroyer, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but anyways, yeah, like he's taking her back there for that reason, to experience what she felt there, um, to unlock that, and then she takes over the vision because she's in control as well,
Mm.
and shows him what he shows her, and that's where he comes in to try and be like, you're taking the wrong things from this, right? Because she's trying to like, instead of listening to his lesson, man, being a dad, I totally understand this, because you'll be in the middle of trying to impart some wisdom with your kid, and they will turn around and they'll start arguing about something else. And it's like, no, you're too busy with your retort to hear the thing that I'm trying to tell you, right? Like to hear like the wisdom that's being offered, which is just I think that this is just the curse of mentorship, whether it's as a parent or a teacher, is that, like, you have to be prepared to teach the lesson even when the student isn't ready to learn it,
Mm.
because you are not in control of that. All you're in control of is what you can teach and what you can model, right? I and the student has to be open, right? She's not open at this point.
Mm.
And so he recognizes that it's like, okay, you're gonna try and fight me on this, even though you said you won't fight me. This is what he was talking about, right? Because like he pulls out the lightsaber and she says, I won't fight you, and he's like, there's more than one way to fight. We're in a fight. This is a conflict. This is an argument. That's what's happening right now, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So he presses it and he goes back to the physical fight, because
Mm.
he's like, okay, you said you wouldn't fight me, but you're continuing to fight me. So like, let's start back at the beginning. Incorrect, right? And so he presses it. And he's a little bit more literal. That's why Vader comes out. That's why that persona comes out, to really like press her of like, what is it that you're holding on to? What is it that you refuse to accept, that you can move on from this argument that we had when you were 14 years old, right? Because you are still fighting with Anakin there, right? Like she's saying that it's about Vader, and it's not about Vader. She knows. She says it to Luke in the Mando episode, right? Like, when they're talking about him, she's talking about Anakin. She talks about him. She's already done the intellectual work of reconciling that Anakin was manipulated by Palpatine and fell to the dark side out of love and compassion, right? Like, that's what happened. She knows that. She knows it intellectually, but emotionally she hasn't accepted it. That's what's happening here, is that like, and it has nothing to do with Anakin, even though she's saying that it has to do with Anakin, which is why he responds in the way that he does, right? Because she's lying to herself. So he's like, he's incorrect, and he's basically pushing her, and he's like, "What are you afraid of? What are you scared of?" And she's talking about like, "I know what you became. I know, like, yeah, you were powerful. You nobody knew how powerful you would be, how powerful the darkness was in you." And he's turning around and saying to her, holding up the mirror and going like, "You're not worried about me. That happened already. It's done. Can't be undone. You
Mm.
know that. You told Ezra that, right? It's happened. It's over. What she's worried about is herself. If Anakin was her teacher and Anakin fell to the dark side, then she has just as much potential to fall to the dark side as he does. And she thinks that that is her destiny if she continues along the same path that he was on, doing these things out of love and compassion that led him down that path to the dark side. So that's what she's afraid of, right? And Anakin's lesson is yes. But that's true for all Jedi, right? So like there's an ego at play there of like, of somehow they're unique, and it's because he was the chosen one, because she was the Padawan of the chosen one, that somehow their story is different from any other Jedi.
Mm.
And I think that he is trying to pass on to her what he learned far too late, and what he actually he didn't, because he learned it from Luke, which is
Right.
the best part of all of this, is that Luke is there on the Death Star, and he gives into anger, he gives into hate and fear and all of that, and he grabs the lightsaber to strike down Palpatine, and ends up in a fight with Vader, and they fight each other, and they fight to the death. They do, because Luke could have one more stroke and Vader would have been dead, right? He was there. His shadow took over. Luke fell to the dark side, and then he chopped off the hand. He sees that robotic limb. He looks at his own hand, and he accepts it. He doesn't chop his own hand off and go, "I won't become Vader." He looks at himself, he looks at Vader, he looks back at himself, he looks at his lightsaber, and he tosses it aside, and he says, these are the actual words that he says: "You failed, Your Highness. I won't do, I am a Jedi like my father before me. Not better than my father before me. I won't do what he did." He goes through everything that Anakin went through. He goes through that entire process that it takes Anakin another like 20 years to get to, right? He sees Anakin, he learns the lesson, he listens to Yoda and Obi-Wan's words, right or wrong, but he takes it all in that moment. All of that culminates. Whatever other stuff has happened in the comics or novels or whatever, right? It all culminates. He looks at his hand and he accepts the dark side as part of who he is, right? As part of the Force and as part of being a Jedi, is that like, you'll never expel it. You can't get rid of it. And that's what the old Jedi were trying to do. So they were trying to ward it off and keep it at bay,
Mm.
instead of eating their own shadow, accepting it and integrating it into themselves. So Luke does that, right? He says, "I am a Jedi like my father before me." And he accepts all of it. He integrates all of it, and then Palpatine's like, "Well, then you'll die," right? And starts electrocuting him, and that's when Anakin is able to like look at Luke and go, "It's possible, right? It's possible to go all the way to the edge and to still pull yourself out of it." And
Mm.
Anakin does that. So Anakin has learned that lesson from Luke, and now Anakin is going to turn around. And it's so funny because the last time we saw Ahsoka before this series was her talking to Luke and basically saying to Luke, like, you're doing well, you're good,
Mm.
right? She was reassuring him. But the funny part of that is that actually he had something to teach her.
Right.
Which again, when I say like, they're peers, not that hierarchy is false. Um, so Anakin is now from beyond the Force, having fully integrated all of this stuff, because now he's part of the cosmic force. He's looking at her and going like, "This is what you need to do." And that's what she does. She he disarms her, and she has to fight without fighting, right? Which is part of the lesson. She dodges, grabs his hands. She actually, it's great. If you look at the choreography of it and the framing of it, she does exactly what Anakin does with Dooku right before he executes Dooku. It's only one lightsaber, so it's a little bit harder to track. But if you put those scenes side by side, they're very similar. So much of what we saw in this is just reflected in all of these other pieces of Star Wars. But she basically like grabs him, sort of like flips him around, comes around, and then that lightsaber is at his throat, right? And then she steps into it to prove the point to us, the audience. This is for our benefit and somewhat for Anakin's, but mostly for our benefit. We see her eyes illuminated by that red lightsaber. She looks like a Sith for a second, right?
Mm.
And then she deactivates the lightsaber and tosses it aside just like Luke, and she's nope, I
So when
won't
you
do it.
said to look at the choreography, I pulled it up and literally
Yeah.
step by step as you were narrating it, I was watching it. It was pretty funny.
It's
They're like perfectly in tune.
my watch thought I was talking to it. Yeah, it's I mean it's masterful. Like it's just Dave's just a genius. He's so good. He's so good. Um so yeah, so to me like that the whole thing, like that's the purpose of it, is to get us from that point of her fear has been holding her back. Um and it's been stopping her from being able to train Sabine.
Mm.
Uh, so now she needs to find Sabine because she needs to finish Sabine's training because now she's finally ready. I
Mhm.
think like we've been acting as if Ahsoka, because of her connection to the Ashla and the daughter, uh, that she's um and I think especially informed by her performance in Rebels and that scene at the end of Star Wars Rebels, we've sort of had this idea that she is already enlightened. Um, but I think this is a retcon. I mean, like I don't think there's any other way to look at
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
That Dave really looked at the character when he sat down to embark on this part of the journey and went like, we need to show it on screen, and
Yeah.
and I don't want to do it all in flashbacks. So I think like when they sat down to bring Ahsoka into all of this with the intention of her having her own show, um, he set this up and he regressed her back to to really he's like going back to the story that he would have told if he had continued telling her story after Clone Wars,
Mm.
like in that Bad Batch era.
Sure.
I think that's kind of what he's done from a narrative perspective, which is very much a retcon, but it's fine. I mean, like Star Wars is wildly
It's
inconsistent,
cool
anyways.
as long as it's well made. I don't care about retcons
Exactly.
as long
Well,
as
as long
it's
as
like
there's a
awesome.
reason, yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it's motivated, it's not just about like, oh, we're gonna
Yeah.
retcon this so that we can bring a character back that's popular,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But like, we're gonna retcon this because it's like because there's actually a lot of really important storytelling that needs to happen here. Um, and then I think that the Sabine stuff came out of that.
Mm.
I think that is sort of like he started there with Ahsoka, which is why the show is called Ahsoka, when really the central character so far has been Sabine. But it's like, okay, like let's like it's and it's the show should really be called Master and Apprentice, right? Like that's really what the show should be called, because if you were gonna give it a title, then like thematically that's the like that is what this series is about.
Sure.
And I think it's what season 2 will also be about, because we're going to transition from Ahsoka and Sabine as the central master and apprentice in this season, because they're going to go through their stuff, and I think by the end of the season they'll have come to a good place, and there'll still be road left for them to progress down. But I think that when we get into season 2, it's very much going to be Ezra and Jason, right? Like it's going to transition to the two
Mm.
of them. Man, oh dude, we have not even talked about Jason Syndulla in this episode.
Two
uh
young actors killing it in the show, man.
Crushing. I mean, like I cried, like I literally cried, because that scene when he's like, first there's the whole thing of like, can't you hear it,
Mm.
right? Which is great, but then Hera comes up and it's like listen, and she closes her eyes, and like, I'm getting emotional talking about it right now. Kanan was in that scene. Like,
Yeah.
there's no other way for me to express
Yeah.
it other than like that was very much Kanan acting through his son. Which is just like, yeah, I've been saying this a lot. It's very hard for me to put this stuff into words. This is almost impossible. Kanan is my second favorite Star Wars character, and um like his story is really, really meaningful to me. And when we found out that Jason was going to be a part of this series through the reveal of a Lego figure, um I was like, cool, awesome, that's great. I don't think that I'm gonna get what I want. Like, I kind of set myself up for that.
Mm.
Like, prepared myself for like, he's gonna be in it, he'll be in a scene or two. To get this moment between Kanan and Hera, and then the scene right after it with Huyang,
Mm.
I just like, dude, I could not. I I would never have been arrogant enough to ask for this, because I don't deserve it. I didn't deserve it, but like, it was so good. It was so good that like, I am back. I have tears in my eyes right now talking about it, because it just, um yeah, I don't know, there's something about it. There was something, again, it's really difficult to put into words, but it did. And so much of this is the casting. I don't know how they did it. I don't understand casting directors and how they get this good at this. I know that it's a skill set, because a great casting director is a great casting director, and it's like, that's why the Marvel movies are what they are, is because of the casting, and that's why a lot of Star Wars in the Disney era has been what it is. They're at a very big advantage, because no one's going to say no. So they literally can find whoever they want. But I mean, like, this, how they found this diamond in the rough, needle in the haystack kid to play the son of Freddie Prinze Jr. and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, really, like, but even with a little bit of that Vanessa Marshall in it. How they managed to find this kid who absolutely is a young Kanan Jarrus.
Mm.
I mean, like, listen, you can cut that kid's hair and give him a ponytail, and we can do some Clone Wars flashbacks. Like, because he can play Caleb Doom,
Yeah, for sure.
like 100%. Yeah, like, let's cast Depa Balaba, and do a show about the two of them. Make the stories in the comic into a series. Do a 6-episode Kanan Jarrus series, or Caleb Doom series. That would be a dream come true. So yeah, this is the dangerous road that I take myself down. It's like, I can't ask for these things. I don't deserve them. But yeah, and to have it, the way that he sells it, the way that Dave sells it, isn't with Jason, it's with Hera, right? Because it's the pushing on her as she listens to her son.
Mm.
And there's the question there of like, does she hear it? Right? You're kind of sitting there going like, can she hear the lightsabers?
Mm.
Or is she just feeling that presence, right? But
Right.
it immediately took me back to the end of Rebels, and the scene where, like, after Kanan has died, and he comes to her, right,
Mm.
and puts his hand on her shoulder, and it's like, I felt that scene, I felt that moment in in the scene in this episode. It just, like, it automatically took me back there. And that's, again, that is Dave knowing exactly what he's doing,
Mm.
like, that is not an accident.
Mm.
That's not me connecting two lines that are not connected. Like, I've connected the dots. No, you haven't connected anything, right? Like, no, I have connected the dots. These are dots, and That's what this whole series has been connecting dots, and that's what the end credits are every time. Is all the dots connecting each other. Joe, I could
Yes.
kiss that man. I could kiss that man. I swear
You
to
might
you.
have something to say about it, but
Well, I wouldn't do it without consent, but I
all right.
just,
Well, that's good. That's all that matters.
or at least I'd give him warning, like I do for you. You know.
All right. Good.
Like I just so you know, this
Hey,
is gonna
man,
happen.
this is about to happen. So.
Yeah, do what you got to do to stop it, but it's happening. Yeah, what an episode, dude. What a show. It is both a blessing and a curse because we're in this weird limbo. We talk about it every week. We are in the world between worlds talking about this show, which is kind of awesome because like it's just you and me here.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually everybody else will get to hear these conversations, and I I don't know. It's almost like with no pressure, um, and we can sit with it for a little while, and we don't have to record it right away to make sure that
Yeah,
we get the episode
marinate
out
a
right
little
away.
bit.
All
Yeah.
that stuff. Um, but yeah, it's like, but oh my god, what is wrong with you, phone watch? It thinks that I'm doing a workout. It thinks that I started a workout at some point.
Well, your
Anyways,
heart rate is getting up thinking
that
about
must be
kissing
it.
Dave Filoni.
But it is a curse because like I want to engage with everybody else. I want
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
time I'm on social media and I see everybody talking about it, and it's like it takes a lot. I have drafted so many posts, whether it's Twitter or Threads or whatever, in response to people saying certain things where I want to get into it, and then like I'll stop because I'm like, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing it until this
Mhm.
strike is over. It's very important. It's really important. It does. I don't know about you. It does feel like there's been a bunch of stuff on social media lately about, and we'll see. Again, it's funny because like by the time that people hear this, they'll know the answer. But it feels like the studios are starting to feel the pressure that like
Good.
if they don't resolve this and get back to work, that they are not going to have product come this time next year. Like
Yeah.
they
Well,
are
maybe
going to
they
be
should
screwed.
feel that way.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
You
But
know.
it's the thing that's flabbergasting is that it has taken this long for them to figure it out.
Right.
Right? Like for not for them to figure it out. I think that again, like Ahsoka, intellectually they understood it, but they haven't really felt it
Yeah.
until just now. And it is because they are starting to see the losses that they're taking right now in the midst of all of this because
Mhm.
it's not been good. So hopefully that means that we are closer to a deal than further away. But I don't know. It's driving me nuts. I just want to talk about Star Wars with my friends, and I can do that. I mean, like we have avenues where we
Yeah,
can do
for
that. We
sure.
talk on the Discord. We talk one on one and that sort of thing. Have conversations on that. But yeah, I'm just not. It's anywhere where I'm like, is this? Am I doing free promotion? Is this free promotion for the
Mm.
show? If it's free promotion for the show, don't do it. Right? That's the picket line that we don't cross. So, anyways, it is what it is, and we are in this situation that we are in. But I don't know. But it's also kind of the best of both worlds. It's a bit like talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi without doing the episodes and that sort of thing, and getting to just enjoy it from
Right.
week to
Yeah.
week. The other thing is there's I'm just gonna this is just a little footnote here, but I find it funny that some of the people whose opinions I definitely don't want to hear on this show are also people who are like up in arms about certain things, and so they're not going to talk about the show anyways. And I'm like,
All right. Cool.
good, because the show's really, really good, and I don't want you bringing me down with your negativity about whatever, right? So part of me is like, this has been nice
Yeah,
that they're
that's
like, oh,
fine.
I won't talk about it. And it's like, good, because I actually
Oh
don't want to hear
no.
what you have to say.
I'm so
Yeah,
I'm so it's like, you know how when someone who's like really narcissistic or just like a negative person in general is just like giving you the silent treatment and they think they're punishing you,
yeah.
but really it's just like, no, I prefer this. This is actually pretty wonderful.
Yeah,
No
thanks for
problem.
leaving me alone. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Anything in closing? Anything you got left to say?
Oh man. It's a feeling that I've noticed that changed from last week to this week. Last week, I remember feeling, man, what's Thrawn up to? When are we gonna get Thrawn?
Mm,
And then this week, I was like, I don't care. I don't care
yeah,
about Thrawn. Give me more of this. This is rad.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't care what Thrawn's up to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Like I at no point during the episode was I like, but what's going on
Yeah. Where's
with them?
Sabine?
Right?
Where's
It's like, and
Thrawn? Where's Ezra? No, I don't care. This was
yeah,
awesome.
Tuesday night we're gonna get that, right?
Sure.
We're gonna get our catch up episode.
Sure.
And then we'll be back into it. But yeah, yeah, 100%. Also we can't close out the episode without saying Leia Organa. We got
Ah,
the
a little
Senator
shout out.
Organa
A
shout
little
out
shout
in
out.
this episode. So it's nice to know that Leia is involved,
Hmm.
and is aware of this.
Right.
Um, for obvious reasons, it's like there's a distance there that's
Hmm.
going to be maintained, and I think that's the right call. But I want I just since the creation of the characters in Star Wars Rebels, all I have wanted is more interaction between those characters and the original trilogy characters.
Mm.
um that to me is just something that like I need to know how those dynamics work, and we know a little bit because Forces of Destiny gave us the
Sure. Yeah.
episode with Han and Hera,
Mm.
where we know that the two of them have a bit of a rivalry between the Ghost and the Falcon. Which I listen, unpopular opinion, I go with the Ghost. I go with the Ghost.
Ooh.
The Fal-
Ooh.
the Falcon is amazing, but I go with the Ghost every time.
You're in trouble with the fans.
Yeah. Um, but in the way that Han and Hera don't get along, I know that Hera and Leia are friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
Like I
sure.
just
Yeah.
know that. And so I want to it doesn't have to be in this, right? Like it could be in something animated, or it could be in a comic or a novel or something like that. But just to have those two characters in a scene together, I think would be
Mm.
something really special. Um and yeah, yeah. Just anytime that we can connect back with those characters is always nice, and I think that was the right way to do it. That
Yeah,
was
I've
the right
never
way to
really
do
had a problem with established characters showing up in Star Wars, and like I know it's like people feel like it makes the galaxy smaller, but it's like, yeah, but these are the characters I care about. I want to see what they're up to.
Yeah,
Also, like I'm
yeah.
down for new characters, but like
It,
I like seeing the characters I like
yeah,
coming back and doing cool stuff and helping.
the small galaxy thing always bugs me because I always just go back to, it's like, it's not an anything galaxy, it's made up, you guys. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist for reals.
True.
It's a setting, it's a backdrop to tell stories about morality and
Mm,
like it's like this is our modern myth, right? It's like when people say the same thing about superhero stuff, and it's like, no, we like it. We like
mm,
it. It makes us happy. But there, and that is the thing that I think I bristle at the most with online criticism, is that so often it is not about how could this be better. It's about how could I make this thing that makes other people happy, like how can I take it down a peg,
yeah.
which like that's when it bothers me, right? Because like you and I, like, we'll be critical, right? We were very critical during Book of Boba Fett,
Mm,
and I think for good reason. Like that show has a lot of story problems and a lot of pacing issues, and I think that there's one very egregious mistake that they made in killing the Tuscans, right? Like in order to advance Boba's story, it's like I doesn't advance Boba's story as much as keeping them around would have. um so like we'll be critical when something is in disservice to the characters or the story, right?
mm,
But if you want to criticize something because it literally makes people happy,
yeah.
I've never heard a group of people cheer as loud. The only thing I can compare it to is during the Olympics, in Vancouver watching Team Canada like score goals in a giant crowd of other people in Vancouver. And it like that moment is when the hammer goes to Cap in Endgame, right? Which is like only happens because we can put those characters side by side and we can love
Yeah.
them individually, but
Yeah.
when they come together, it's greater than the sum of its parts,
Mm.
right? And like that moment is the dragon that I chase when I'm watching these shows. I mean, like, listen, I they did more fan events because they're trying to promote this show without using the stars, right? So they did more fan events and they showed this episode in theaters, and I wish I could have seen this in a theater with a crowd, right? Not for the screen. I don't care about the screen.
Yeah.
My screen's very nice, right? Like, and I bump up the brightness and like I make sure that I can actually see what I'm watching. I've learned that lesson, but I so I like watching at home, but the thing that I miss about watching at home, although I got a little bit of it this week because I watched it with Kara, is that communal experience
Yeah,
watching it
for sure.
with somebody. I mean, like what I would give to watch this show in the same room with you, because I
Yeah.
think it would transform it for us, right?
Mm.
It
Oh,
just makes it a different experience. But
dude, I was lucky enough. My favorite experience from Anaheim, like out of every amazing thing that happened while I was at Celebration Anaheim, was one of the other artists, Adam Schickling, was accidentally given a hotel room that has a conference room in it. So he's like, "Oh, guys, the first two episodes of Kenobi are debuting. I'll hook up my Disney Plus account to the TV, and just like anyone who wants to come will come." And there were about 20 of us all in this giant conference room watching Kenobi together, and it was just as good as a theater experience
yeah,
to be seeing it for the first time with my only my friends.
yeah,
So it was all people that I knew every single person in that room. It was so awesome.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
like, like you said, you're chasing that high. Like, that's the high that I want to chase from my
yeah,
next
yeah,
like
yeah.
communal Star Wars experience was
I
that
mean,
moment.
I could see you and Hayden
Mm,
when I was watching Obi-Wan Kenobi.
mm.
So so I don't know. I got a pretty good experience on that one too.
That's pretty cool.
As they weren't quite close enough for me to throw something at them, but they were definitely, I mean, like I could see where they were sitting. The
Right.
back of their heads.
Mm,
Along with everybody else. So all the people that were there
mhm.
from the show at Celebration. So that was, I mean, like that feeling when it was revealed that Leia was in the show.
Right.
That room was like electric. Everybody was like, "Are you kidding me?" That was so good, so good. I said this on during our Obi-Wan episodes, but you weren't there, so I'll repeat it for your benefit because you're the only one here right now, anyways, listening. I I when you start to it like when it cuts to Alderaan and then the music kind of starts and
Mm,
we get this slow reveal of the girl that's not actually Leia, but that
mhm,
like it's like the trick reveal that Leia is going to be in the show.
mhm.
Um, right from the second that we saw Alderaan, I turned to Amanda, who was sitting next to me, who I was sitting watching it with, and I was like, I said literally the words. I was like, "This is genius. What's the one thing that could get Obi-Wan Kenobi
Yep.
to leave Tatooine? The one thing. There's only one thing that could get him to leave that planet, and it's Leia. So yeah, man, we're so people complain about Star Wars. People complain about Star Wars. Listen, we have discussions and we go, this episode, that episode, whatever, and we can be critical and that sort of thing. But I don't ever want to be seen in this day and age as complaining about Star Wars because we are so damn lucky
Yeah.
that we are getting what we're getting, that we got the Clone Wars, that we got Rebels, and that all of that can culminate in this Ahsoka show, that we've gotten Obi-Wan and Solo and the sequel trilogy and Rogue One and Andor. Like, it's just, I don't know, man. Other than Rise of Skywalker, there really hasn't been anything bad, right? Like, and I would say it sucks that it's the finale of like sort of everything where we're at right now. But like that's what it all culminates in, is this awful story that like just breaks every promise this saga has ever made. While looking at you and going, "Isn't this what you wanted? I thought this is what you guys wanted." And it's like, no, it's not. It's you know what Rise of Skywalker is. I just had Lucky Charms before we started recording. I had a bowl of Lucky Charms, and
Okay.
everybody thinks they want a bowl full of marshmallows, but try eating a bowl full of marshmallows. After the first 3 spoonfuls, which is the first act of that movie, you're like, you know what? I really miss the cereal pieces. Could we get a little bit of substance here? Can
There,
we get
there,
just a little bit?
there is a candy store in Manhattan
Yeah,
that sells that. It's a box of Lucky Charms with just the I don't know. I don't think
yeah,
it's actually Lucky Charms, but it's the exact same
yeah,
type of marshmallow. And this was like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something that I was there, and I saw that and I was like, yes, I'm doing it. I
yeah.
had one bowl. I was like, I am never doing this again.
Exactly. Yeah. No, don't you it yeah. It is actually the job of a storyteller, of a filmmaker, to give us what we need and not what we want,
Mm,
especially when it comes to Star Wars. So,
mm,
on that note, let's wrap the episode up. I yeah, I'm just such a happy Star Wars fan right
yeah,
now.
we're eating
Show's
good.
so good.
We're eating good, man.
It's so good. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Joe, thank you for listening to me talk about Star Wars for the last 2
Always.
hours. And yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you for listening to Thunderquack Force Perspectives. Our opening theme is composed for us by Christy Carew. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV, and join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/thunderquack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the Thunderquack Podcast Network.